Ontario's highest court says doctors in the province must refer patients for procedures even if that conflicts with the physician's moral and religious beliefs. The ruling says doctors don't have to provide such services themselves, but they must refer the patient to a doctor who does. The CBC's Magda Gabriselassie heard from doctors on both sides of the issue and has more on today's decision.
Carol, there were three groups that were part of this appeal representing about 1,500 doctors in Ontario. They're obviously upset about this decision, but there are others that are applauding it.
We are deeply disappointed.
The Court of Appeals has decided, religious beliefs or not, doctors in Ontario have to give referrals to patients, even if it's for medical procedures they personally disagree with.
We believe that the appeal court upheld what we think is a flawed and damaging position for freedom of conscience and professional integrity.
The doctors are given options: ask their staff to provide the referral, or they can specialize in a type of medicine that's less likely to conflict with their beliefs.
I do believe they have options.
In the 1980s, Carolyn Egan was one of many activists that fought for abortion rights. She says the ruling ensures women continue to have access to the services they need.
A lot of people are very vulnerable. A lot of people live in areas, rural Ontario, Indigenous reserves and others, where they have no choice but to go to the one doctor that's there. So it really cuts down on the access if that's what a woman's choice is.
Also celebrating this ruling is Kelly Doctor, a lawyer representing Dying with Dignity. She says doctors aren't being forced to do the procedures they disagree with. They're being told to make a referral.
What that means is that they're required to put their patient in contact with a clinician or an agency that will provide the service that the doctor objects to. So it's a fair way of both accommodating the doctor's religious concerns and not requiring doctors to participate in practices that they disagree with, while at the same time making sure that every patient in Ontario has access to the medical services that they need and require.
The question now is whether the doctors who disagree will now take their fight to the Supreme Court of Canada. Carol.
Magda, thank you. The CBC's Magda Gabriselassie in Toronto. Let's hear from both sides of the issue. Joining me now in Toronto is Kerry Bowman. He is a bioethicist at the University of Toronto. Kerry believes the ruling is just. And in Calgary, we have Dr. Ryan Wilson. He is a practicing physician in British Columbia, and he is also the president of Canadian Physicians for Life, one of the organizations that opposed this ruling. Dr. Wilson, let me begin with you tonight. What do you think the impact of this ruling will be?
Well, we believe that overall this will create a situation of inferior patient care and at the very least will not improve access. And there's a few reasons for thinking that. The first and foremost is that if you create a situation and force physicians to go against their conscience on a daily basis, that leads to physician burnout, that leads to many physicians leaving their practice into early retirement, switching fields or moving jurisdictions. So there will be a drain on the number of practicing physicians in Ontario. But more importantly, it undermines the concept of physician judgment, professional judgment, when it comes to recommending treatments or recommending against treatments. And that, once that is undermined, that also will lead to poor patient care. Additionally, there is a sizable group of patients in Ontario, and it's the same across the country, who actually seek out physicians that have a more traditional Hippocratic method, who don't want to be cared for by a physician who will make a referral or be complicit in an act even though they think it's wrong. So there's a group of patients that are actually going to suffer directly as a result of this decision or this policy. And so overall, I think this is actually a loss for medical care in Ontario.
All right. Kerry Bowman, what do you think the impact will be?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, it's a very tough call. And I actually don't disagree with some of the things that, Dr. Wilson has just stated. But I think when on the balance of all of it, patient access to what are legal healthcare procedures has got to take precedence, and that is what the court has decided. So we're looking primarily at two categories. One is medical, not exclusively, but primarily medical assistance in dying and abortion. Certainly with medical assistance in dying, some of these patients are truly vulnerable. I have seen them. There's no question about that. They're vulnerable and they can be very, very unwell. And to put any form of barriers in the way of people that want information and often Am I a candidate? How do I pursue this? I think would be very, very problematic. We've also got major geographic problems in this country, or challenges in this country. It's a big place, including the province of Ontario. And people could be in remote areas, not online. It could really isolate people. And, you know, from a human rights point of view, Ontario Human Rights says that access to services, including healthcare services, have to be established.
Yeah, what's your reaction to that, Dr. Wilson?
Well, first of all, I agree completely that these are, much of the time, very vulnerable patients. And I agree completely that there shouldn't be obstruction to achieve access to procedures that we all agree are legal in Canada. And no one is suggesting that physicians should be able to obstruct that access. We're merely stating that there are other ways to ensure access, and it shouldn't fall on the individual physician. That's too large a burden. If we think about palliative care, for example, in Canada, approximately 15% of Canadians have access to excellent palliative care. And I think we can all agree that's a problem. And it's a problem that's shared amongst many different fields in medicine. The individual physician can't be responsible for ensuring access. It's just not possible.
Okay,
I think...
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Continue with your thought.
What we believe is that on a systems level, there should be a mechanism in place to ensure access if that's what Ontario deems appropriate, but it shouldn't fall on the individual physician.
Okay, what happens to a person who requests an abortion or end-of-life services and the doctor refuses to even make the referral? What happens, Dr. Wilson?
Well, currently it depends where you are. In the vast majority of places, and Ontario is included, there is a centralized service that people can access information and referrals that don't require their own family physician being complicit in that process.
So would you say, so do you say to the person, so if the person wants to die, they're in pain, they're in, kind of distress, you assume, do you say to them, I'm sorry, I cannot refer you, here's a number you can call? Or how does that physically work on the ground?
If you're wondering on a patient-by-patient level, essentially I make my position clear that I'm not abandoning the patient, I'm not abandoning you, I care for you deeply, and it's for that exact reason that I believe that the service you're asking for is not in your best interest, and so I can't be a part of it. If you would like information on a general level, you're free to access the telehealth service in Ontario or whichever province you happen to be in.
All right, Carrie?
Yeah. I mean, I agree with some of that, but to say the service is not in your best interest, here's what worries me, is if you're putting any element of shame onto a woman seeking a termination of pregnancy or a person seeking medical assistance in dying, that's very, very problematic. It really would be. So, the thing, effective referral for many people, and I know many physicians, not all, that would say, I really do have concerns about this religiously, but the fact that I could get someone else to do it, meaning someone else to provide a phone number, information, and assessment, is okay with me. And I realize that's not okay for everyone, and that's what a lot of this hearing is about. And I'm going to say, as an ethicist, I get it, because what many people are saying is, if you think something is wrong, you can't be complicit with it on moral grounds. But what I would say is these two things are colliding, and we really, really have to put patient well-being first and patient human rights first. And I think that's what our courts have done. And I think they've got it right on this one. But I would not take it lightly, and I don't take it lightly. I think this is a serious issue.
Do you think, Dr. Wilson, that that's the right framing of it, that physicians are putting their beliefs over patient care?
I would actually strongly disagree with that. This isn't about a small group of physicians who are kind of desperately clinging to satisfy their own scruples. We object because we're interested in good patient care. We've come to the conclusion that it's morally objectionable to kill your own patient. And for that reason, as Dr. Bowman mentioned, I cannot be complicit in that. That would make me a very poor physician if I did something that I thought was wrong, either medically or ethically. And I agree that patient care is the basis of this. And I think everyone on both sides of the debate is actually on the same page on that. We all are motivated by concern for patient care. We disagree on the specifics of how that should happen, but overall we're all interested in the same end goal. What's interesting in the decision is that the court actually upheld the idea that interference with freedom of religion is not trivial. It is a big deal, and I think we can all kind of see why that is. And I'm talking about physicians specifically now.
Yeah.
And so to go against that is, in the first place, it's potentially damaging to physicians and their well-being, but more importantly, as I mentioned before, it's actually damaging to the doctor-patient relationship. And I'd also like to agree completely that there should be no element of shame. There's absolutely no place for that. And I can honestly tell you I don't know a single objecting physician that will shame patients when they're requesting a service with which the physician disagrees. And I know from my own practice that I make it absolutely clear that I'm not abandoning the patient, that I will not judge them for what they may or may not choose, and that I will always be available to take care of them should they agree with that.
Okay, Carrie, presumably though, a physician who holds these beliefs would let all of their patients know in advance that this is who they are, that they are unwilling to do these things should the times come, so that maybe patients can find another doctor if their values and needs clash.
That's tough when you're in potentially like a large teaching hospital or something, because you're
rural,
dealing with, maybe rural, but you're dealing with complex teams of people, so that would be a tough call. Secondly, many people are not foreseeing having a catastrophic diagnosis that may warrant a request for medical assistance in dying, or a very unwanted pregnancy out of the blue. So that could, in fact, be problematic. So some people say, well, don't go into medicine. I'm going to say here, though, I do feel for a lot of the physicians that I have seen that struggle with this. They were broadsided by this. They went into medicine years ago. Not all, there's younger ones as well, but some went into medicine years ago where this was really not on the horizon. So now it's here, and they're saying, how do I make peace with this? And, is it a violation of the rights of physicians? Well, it is actually, in my opinion, but I'm still sticking to the position that we have got to put patients first in this, and people do need access to this, and I do see a high level of vulnerability, particularly with requests for medical assistance in dying. And there's already been some, they're not common, but there's been some cases where there's been very unnecessary barriers to patients.
Okay. Dr. Wilson, let me ask you this. The law has been established so far. Will you comply with the law?
Well, I practice in BC, so personally it's not as much an issue for me, but I can tell you from the perspective of Canadian Physicians for Life, the struggle is not over. We have no intention of abandoning our members in Ontario to this overly insensitive policy. And more importantly, we won't abandon the patients in Ontario that are actually seeking conscientious Hippocratic physicians. So the fight is not over. Where exactly it will take us, I don't know yet.
Yeah. And do you think that the physicians who do hold the views that you hold should say to all their patients before the patients agree to take you on as their physician, these are the values we hold, so therefore, you need to know who I am as a physician before you agree to take me on as your doctor?
Well, I'm sure every physician probably handles that a little bit differently, and I'm not sure that it should be mandated one way or the other. I do, because I want, when I meet a new patient, I want them to know my background and the style of practice. And it's not just about abortion and MAID. It's a variety of other situations where there's a lot of variation amongst physicians. So I feel it important to make my patients aware of that. I could understand why some physicians might not want to do that, and for that reason I'm not sure that it should be mandated, but certainly there's a place for that, I think, or at least a discussion.
All right, well, we have to leave it on that note. Carrie Bowman, bioethicist at the University of Toronto, Dr. Ryan Wilson, President of Canadian Physicians for Life, thank you both very much.
My pleasure, thank you.